Hello there, and welcome back. This is part 2 of my Lightsaber for Beginners series. Part 1, we talked about the different types of lightsabers, and today we're going to talk about the anatomy and the tech. So just to reiterate, like I said in my previous video, this is intended to help new people who are just getting started in the hobby with some of the more common things that are out there available on the market as of right now. I am by no means a full expert on lightsabers. I've had a lot of fun collecting lightsabers over the last 2 years and participating in different saber communities, and so I kind of want to bring that back and help kind of go through some of the common things that you might see discussed. So with that said, let's get into the anatomy. So the first things that we want to talk about are just the common parts of a lightsaber. So of course, this is the hilt. That's the blade, pretty simple there. But then the hilt itself was often broken down into several parts. So you've got your emitter, and I've got an emitter section from my other staff, or the other half of my staff. This middle section here is the switch section for obvious reasons. Then you have your grip section, and then this bottom piece is your pommel. And with a lot of sabers that different parts will be removable. Sometimes you can swap out emitters. Most sabers, though, will have a removable pommel. I know all Ultra Sabers, Saber Forge, and many other companies have a removable pommel, usually to get to the battery. We'll actually get to the internals as well today. So before we move on to the internals and kind of more parts of the actual saber, I just want to briefly talk about parts of the blade itself. Now this is a small piece of day blade, and it's a day blade just because it has a different color. But the majority of blades that you'll see are going to be these trans white. Sometimes they'll be clear, silver, frosted, just to diffuse the light. But there's parts of that blade as well. So there's the tip, and on baselet sabers. Baselet being similar to this, where you have the LED that just kind of shines down the hollow tube. But a baselet will have a tip like this, and at the bottom of that tip will be a mirror. So you'll have your light shining this way, and that will go up through the blade, hit that mirror, come back. It kind of helps even out the light. You also will have diffusion film, which is this stuff in the middle. I make my own blades and stuff. I cut them, I get them from the custom saber shop. I get the blade stock and the tips, and then I just use cellophane. I went to a hobby store and got the cellophane. You just roll it and then you put it in there, and that helps actually diffuse the light. It helps reflect it all up there, and it keeps it a lot more even all along the blade. And of course, that's on a baselet saber. With a Neopixel saber, where you have the LEDs all throughout the blade. Check this real quick. So, had a brief technical difficulty there. Essentially, the connector between the bottom of this blade and the Neopixel pins here, they were just slightly off. So even though I turned it on, there wasn't enough connection. So I just loosened these screws here, and there we go. So I actually I have a video that goes in a lot more depth with the difference between a baselet and a Neopixel. I'll actually put that in the comments below, as well as a link in the description. So I won't go too much into the differences between Neopixel, that has lights in the blade, and a baselet. Just know that most of my sabers here are actually baselet, meaning they just have an LED in the hilt, shines up through a hollow blade. This is the only Neopixel that we have here today. But let's take a look at the internals of a baselet saber. Now, really the only difference between most internals are going to be that instead of having an LED here, you're going to have those pixel pins, which is what I was having problems with that one. It was just the blade had come loose. That happens from time to time. You just got to make sure that it's fully pressed on there. Now, this is, I'm treating this as a pretty common lightsaber that you can find on the market. This is specifically an LGT. LGT Saber Studios is a company that makes a lot of these saber cores and parts. A lot of different companies sell them. Outer rim saber parts, Vire sabers, Crimson Dawn. I'm going to get into the differences between the companies and the ones that I recommend in another video, but you're going to see these saturate the market. But they do have a lot in common with other sabers that I have seen other people review. So for example, a chassis is this plastic white piece. And you can't see this under the switch section. This is an aluminum piece that goes over the switch section, but if I take some screws out, push this down, I could take this core out. And it can fit into other sabers. That's actually one of the things I like about the LGT sabers and a lot of vendors that sell them. But a lot of sabers are going to have a chassis, and it's important that it does have some saber companies don't have chassis, Ultra Sabers, but the chassis is very important because it not only holds your battery pack, it holds your speaker, it holds your LED, it's got your switch section, your recharge port, and most importantly, you've got your soundboard. Now this is the Crimson core from Crimson Dawn, and all that means is it's their proprietary board. They've got they custom made or custom commissioned, I believe, different sound fonts. You can only get that from Crimson Dawn, but other LGT sabers, the functionality is the same. So you've got your recharge port. That's important because that charges your battery when it gets low. But I personally prefer an external charger. Here's an example of one. You just kind of plug your USB cord in there just to charge that. But what I prefer to do, rather than using the recharge port, is to just pop this battery out and have a fresh one ready to go. And that does a couple of things for you. One, if your saber is low, you don't have to wait for it to charge. And it can take 2 to 4, I know with the Neopixel sabers, it can take upwards of 8 hours to fully charge. If you're in the middle of a con, or just walking around in a costume, or you're out dueling, that's going to be really inconvenient. So you have a spare battery. This is a lithium-ion battery. You just swap those out. You put your drained battery on the external charger, and you're good to go. So that's the different parts of the sabers. So a lot of times these, your grip section will just go over the bottom of that, like so. You just screw that back in. And then you do the same with your emitter. And the last thing briefly that I want to go over is using a blade plug. So I just recently did a video on the different types of blade plugs, but basically all that is it's just a little, doodad, different, whatchamacallit. Usually it's a piece of blade stock with something on top. Usually it can be, a company symbol. For example, this is Crimson Dawn. It can be, things that look like mechanical parts. But the goal of the blade plug is to, block on that. You see the LED right down in there, and this is very, very bright. If that was to shine in your eye, you could potentially blind yourself. But a lot of people like to display their saber, just on a stand like so, and they won't have the blade. So blade plug is really good to kind of put in there, kind of hold in place with your retention screws. And now, I can turn that on, I can shine that in my eyes, and it's bright, but it's not like super blinding bright. So that is the purpose of a blade plug. And again, like I mentioned in my first video, if you guys have a question about anything I've gone over, please leave a comment. I get back and answer questions pretty quick, usually within a day or so. If you want me to expand on something, I might actually have a previous video on that. I can leave a link to that upon request. But otherwise, that was part 2. Join me again for part 3. We're actually going to go over some of the electronic features of the lightsabers. And may the Force be with you.